Let's look at the steps in rough skinning. It will be much easier to remove the feet before you start. Use a heavy-bladed cutting knife and twist the legs, then twist the back feet out. The front one should come off easily by cutting through the joint and also using a quick twist. Another method is chopping them with a small hatchet. Lay the beaver on its back, tail towards you. Some guys like to use a cradle, others prefer to skin flat. Either way, make sure the surface is clean and grease-free. Cut around the tail, but not too deep, or you'll lose your carrying handle. If you intend to skin the tail, take it off later. Now, cut from the tail up to the vent and around each side to the top. Not too deep. This is where the castors are located, and you don't want to cut into them. Now take the back of your knife and draw a line from the bottom of the lower lip to the top of the vent. This will help you keep a straight line. You can use a knife, sheetrock knife, or shingle blade to make this cut. If this cut gets too far off center, it may look misshapen when you nail it to the board or overstretched at the short side. It works best with a knife from the vent up to the lip and a shingle blade from the lip back to the vent. Hold the skin taut as you're cutting. This will help keep the cut straight. Don't cut too deep or you'll open the stomach cavity, which makes a mess. Keep the blade under the pelt, but on top of the stomach muscle. This is more likely to happen with a smaller beaver. Once you have opened the pelt, you can reach either side of the cut and pull the pelt apart some to give your knife some room. This is where a good beaver knife with a rounded blade and tip will make the job much easier. Now, start long, easy strokes with the skinner held angled more toward the carcass than the hide. Leave all the fat on the pelt and just move the whole length of the body. Pull the pelt with one hand and slide your knife with the other till the pelt is free of the belly and chest. When you move up to the head, skin down to the jowls on either side, working from the midline cut all the way up to the middle of the lower jaw. One hint just inside the open pelt by the front legs are the front teats. If you take some time and clean skin this area just by changing the angle of your knife, it may save you from hitting them with your fleshing knife and opening a hole in the pelt if you beam the beaver later. Beavers have 4 teats. The females are larger than the males in older beaver. The other 2 are farther out on the sides of the chest, about 4.5 to 5 inches behind the front ones on the adult beaver. As you reach the vent, it is also good to try to clean skin this area. It is the weakest part of the pelt and is easily torn when you are fleshing the pelt on a beam. Also, the area around the tail is a very oily fat, and when you are beaming the pelt, if this edge is already clean, it saves all that oily fat from getting on the pelt as you push over the back edge. Once you have the pelt removed as far to the side as you can reach, you will be at the legs. Now you want to pull them through the holes where you can remove the legs. This takes a little bit of feel with your hands. You grip the hide on the outside of the leg and roll it up over the leg. Cutting the pelt free from the carcass as you roll, eventually the pelt will be at the end of the leg bone, and just start cutting it free on the opposite side of the leg. Now just continue freeing the pelt around the side of the beaver. When you move up to the head, skin down to the jowls on either side. Working from the midline cut, go all the way up to the middle of the lower jaw. Once you have one side free, turn the beaver and do the same thing on the other side. This time, start at the head and work back, freeing the legs as you go and clean skinning around the vent. Now the beaver is open on the belly side. This is a good time to remove the castors and oil sacs. These lay either side of the vent with the oil sacs lower on the belly. They all open into the vent, which is anatomically named the cloaca. They are both covered by a thin membrane.
Castors, the oil sacs, this is a male. The baculum is the bone in here. The castors and the oil sacs.
You may want to use a sharp-tipped skinning knife. Just lift the membrane and trim away from the top of the castors. Then you can work your fingers in around the backside and just work the castors free of the membrane. It's important to clean all the flesh free from the castors. Be careful, the castors tear easily and will lose their contents, the castorium, and that's where the value is. Once you have them freed, just cut them off from the surrounding tissue and trim off any excess flesh. Hang them to dry someplace with good air circulation. They should hang only enough to form a dry but pliable skin over the castors about 3 to 4 days. Any longer and you will start to lose castorium and weight. Be sure you turn them every day or so to get all the parts dry. Then place them in a plastic bag and freeze them. We will examine the castors, their uses and grades a little farther along in the DVD. Most castors have a dried weight of 4 to 6 or 7 ounces occasionally. A large pair, usually from a big male in the late winter or early spring, may weigh close to a pound. These pictures are of some very unusual sets, probably caused by some sort of abnormality in the beaver.
As you can see here, these ones here, that probably would be a record because nobody's ever seen anything like that previously. This here is a total deformity. $60 an ounce, he's going to do okay.
The oil sacs also have value, and they're just below where the castors were. It's not necessary to trim them free of flesh and membrane, but for most lure-making purposes, it's important to extract the oil from the sac while it's fresh. As the oil ages, it almost immediately starts to taint and the odor changes entirely. When you finish skinning the beaver, just open the sacs into a jar and freeze the liquid oil. The shell also has value and can be dried after it's drained. Many trappers use these dried oil sacs for an attractant while canine trapping. With the beaver on its belly, continue to cut the pelt free of the carcass, starting at the sides and moving into the back. Then start at the tail and pull the hide up and over the head as you cut it free. Moving up the back, the carcass has a lot less fat than down the back. There's only a thin layer of meat, so be careful. It's very easy to cut into the pelt in this area. When you reach the back of the head, on each side are the ears. Cut them close to the skull. We will remove them later. You may want to change knives at this point to one that sharpens easily. Much of the rest of the cutting is in contact with the skull and will quickly dull your sharp-edged skinning knife. Continue down the head, working all the way over to the sides and down the cheeks till you've reached the eyes. Here, just change the angle of your knife slightly. Flatten it till you get to the front of the eye. There's a small ridge here that you'll need to cut straight down on a 90-degree angle to free the pelt. Once you have the pelt past the eyes, continue cutting using a slight knife angle toward the hide, working your way from the mouth on one side to the other. Once you're almost to the nose, you'll feel the bone turn to cartilage. It's important to cut the pelt free as close to the bone as possible. Otherwise, the nose will split, making it very difficult to anchor the pelt over the fleshing beam, if that's the way you intend to flesh your pelts. Once you have mastered the skinning technique, skinning competitions are a lot of fun for trapper get-togethers. Keep at it, and someday you may give Jackie Wurz, considered by most to be Canada's champion beaver skinner, a run for his money. Jackie lives in Alberta and handles anywhere from 2,000 to 3,000 beaver a season. He's been at it for over 25 years. That's somewhere in the neighborhood of 65,000 beaver. His fastest time at a skinning competition was recorded at 1 minute 57 seconds, which includes taking off the feet and tail. Remember these key points when handling your beaver. Wear gloves. Keep skinning table clean. Skin carefully around the teats. Clean castors well and dry them thoroughly. Clean skin around the vent. Leave the nose intact.